Let's start with forebrain, the thinking part. The forebrain consists of three major components: cerebrum, thalamus, and hypothalamus. Let's see cerebrum first. Cerebrum is the largest and the most sophisticated part of our brain and is associated with the complex functions such as memory, association, thinking, and logical reasoning. The outer portion of each cerebral hemisphere is called cerebral cortex. Students, cortex in this context means outer region of the brain. The cortex is extremely folded, forming elevations called gyri and depressions between them called as sulci. These folds increase the surface area of the cortex and hence increases efficiency of brain and also memory power. The inner or middle part of cerebrum is called cerebral medulla. Medulla means middle. The cerebrum can also be divided into areas depending on whether the information is received or passed on. First one is sensory area. These areas are specialized to receive the messages. Forebrain has reason which receive sensory impulses from the various receptors. These separate areas of the forebrain are specialized for hearing, smell, sight, and so on. Second is association areas. There are separate association areas where the sensory information is interpreted by putting it together with information from other receptors as well as with information that is already stored in the brain. This area also does the job of connection between sensory and motor areas. So let's see third one, motor areas. After the brain has received the information and processed it in the association area, a decision is made about how to respond and the information is passed on to the motor areas, which control the movement of voluntary muscles. For example, our leg muscles. Thus, this area is responsible for the action of the voluntary muscles. The cerebrum is horizontally divided into two halves as right and left cerebral hemisphere. Two cerebral hemispheres are interconnected by a thick band of nerve fibers called corpus callosum. Right hemisphere of brain controls the left part of our body and the left hemisphere controls the right part of our body. Each hemisphere has four lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. The frontal lobe, located in the front of our head, governs the function of speech, problem solving, and movement. The parietal lobe at the top back of our head interprets sensation such as touch, taste, pain. The occipital lobe, located at the back of the brain, processes visual images. The temporal lobe, located just above the ear, deals with senses such as smelling and hearing. It's important to understand that each lobe of the brain does not function in isolation. There are very complex relationships among the lobes of the brain. In fact, this all classification is just for understanding and making it simple to understand the brain and its structure and functions. Now let's move forward from cerebrum to other two parts of forebrain, the thalamus and the hypothalamus. First, let's see about thalamus. Thalamus is present in cerebral medulla of the forebrain. Thalamus is a major conducting center for sensory and motor signaling. It acts as a relay center, that is, it sends signal to organs like muscles and glands. Now let's see the hypothalamus. Before we learn more about the other parts of forebrain, let's look at an interesting control mechanism of our brain. When it is hot outside, we sweat. This sweating causes cooling. On the contrary, when it is cold, we shiver to generate heat. Our body acts as a thermostat to maintain a constant body temperature. Similarly, our body gives us signals for responses such as thirst, hunger, pleasure, sleep, and many more. For example, how do we know that we have eaten enough? The sensation of feeling full is because of a center associated with hunger, which is in a separate part of the forebrain. Which part of the forebrain controls these responses? These are controlled by another important part of our forebrain called the hypothalamus. Thus, it controls involuntary functions like hunger, thirst, sleep, sweating, sexual desire, anger, fear, water balance, blood pressure, and also acts as a thermoregulatory center of the body. The hypothalamus also connects the body's nervous system with the endocrine system through its association with the master endocrine gland, the pituitary gland. The forebrain also has areas that control emotions. Now let's learn about the midbrain, the visual and the auditory center. Our brain makes accurate determinations of sound locations using ears. The midbrain is a small part of brain that connects the forebrain with the hindbrain. The midbrain is an important center of the visual and auditory reflexes. It is located between thalamus and hindbrain. Now let's learn about the hindbrain, voluntary and involuntary control center. Our hindbrain has three important parts: cerebellum, medulla, and pons. Let's look at each of these parts one by one. First, let's see about cerebellum. Look at these activities. Our body parts are capable of maintaining perfect coordination and balance when we move. This coordination and balance is controlled by second largest part of our brain, the cerebellum. Any damage to this part results in loss of coordination. Students, do you remember the famous dialogue from one of our movies about Chhota Dimag? Yes, students. It is this our Chhota Dimag, that is cerebellum. Now let's see about medulla oblongata. Identify which of these are involuntary processes. Students, involuntary means those movements which are not under our conscious control. For example, sneezing, sweating. Yes, you are right. They are heartbeat, digestion, breathing, coughing, are involuntary processes that do not require thinking. Our mouth starts watering when we see food of our liking or taste without thinking. Similarly, our heart beats without our thinking about it. In fact, we cannot control these actions by thinking about them, even if we want to. Such involuntary actions or reflexes, including blood pressure, salivation, sneezing, blinking, coughing, and vomiting, are controlled by the medulla oblongata, commonly called as medulla, part of hindbrain. Now let's see about pons. The third part of hindbrain is called pons. It is located below the midbrain in the front of the cerebellum. Pons, a Latin word meaning bridge. It acts as a bridge or a relay center that conducts the signals between the lobes of cerebellum and also between brain and spinal cord. It also controls respiration and sleep cycle. Thus, let's quickly revise what we know. Brain has three parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain, which are further divided into different parts. Forebrain is further divided into cerebrum, thalamus, and hypothalamus, while hindbrain is further divided into medulla, pons, and cerebellum. In the next video, we will see the second organ, that is the spinal cord.